Welcome to the South Australian Aviation Museum. My name's John, I'm one of the volunteers here. And for information, we're all volunteers. No one gets paid in this particular enterprise that we have here. We're standing in hangar number 1. Now this is called a Pentad hangar. It was designed for use by the Royal Navy Fleet Air Arm in World War II. The hangar ended up in Darwin to house Spitfires during the war, and after the war it came to Adelaide, and we're fortunate that we now have it as our primary display hangar. Inside we have a number of aircraft of historic value to South Australia. Now, right behind me you'll see the C-47, which is the military version of the Douglas DC-3, designed in the 1930s. The aircraft behind me was used by the Royal Australian Air Force, and in 1986 it suffered an engine failure on takeoff, heavy landing, and it never flew again. So we were fortunate to take possession of it, and it's used as our flagship, if you like. If you look at our logos on our badges and our publications, the C-47 is always featured there. Also alongside of me here we have a genuine World War II Spitfire. It's a genuine World War II aircraft. It was flown by the Royal Australian Air Force in the New Guinea theatre during the Second World War. In 1943 it actually crashed on landing, and the pieces were left there until the 1970s, when one of our museum volunteers, with government permission, went and recovered all the bits and pieces and had it restored to static display. We now have it on display at the museum here. It's on a long-term loan basis, so it's a privately owned aircraft, but it is a classic Spitfire with genuine World War II history. Also behind me we have a Canberra, which is a first generation English built twin jet bomber aircraft. Over in the far corner we have an F-111. This particular aircraft was used by the Royal Australian Air Force, and we used them for a total of 37 years. They were a low-level attack bomber aircraft, and they were used by the US Air Force and the Australian Air Force, the only two air arms that used it throughout its useful life. The aircraft is significant in that it is a Mach 2.5 capable aircraft. Mach 2.5 meaning 2.5 times the speed of sound. It could fly very high, about 66,000 feet, and at height, when it reached Mach 2.5, that would equate to 2,655 kilometres an hour. If you put that into perspective, that's Adelaide to Melbourne in about 17 minutes, if they were allowed to fly supersonic, of course. So the aircraft that we have here was actually used by ARDU, the Aircraft Research and Development Unit. It was used for weapons calibration testing. So the reason why it's painted white is that as it was dropping munitions, there would be a chase plane flying alongside, and having a white background would create the contrast so that the weapon drop could be filmed in high definition and they can see how it reacted to the actual drop at speed and at height. You flew the Vampires, didn't you? Yeah, well, we'll get you to talk.
Hello, my name is Mike Holtby. I'm just one of the volunteers here, and some of them are pilots and some are engineers, ex-military, other people who are interested in just the aircraft. This particular aircraft here is the Vampire 5, the overseas version of the Vampire 5. It first flew in 1943, just a few weeks after the Meteor, so it was the second jet fighter in the Allied Air Forces. The Vampire was a very good little aeroplane. I learned to fly jets on it in the RAF, and it had an interesting background because the fifth prototype actually held the world speed record for 2 or 3 weeks before the Meteor overtook it, and it also flew to 49,660 feet, which was quite a remarkable achievement at the time. The overseas ones, such as the one we have here in the museum, were fitted with a better engine than the RAF ones, and so they had much more power and could carry more weight.
Come and have a look at the Gipsy Moth. Over here we have a de Havilland Gipsy Moth. This is a 1920s design, English built. The English craftsmen that built aircraft were quite often people who were trained in woodworking, furniture making, etc. And they were skilled woodworkers, so a lot of the construction of early aircraft is using the traditional woodworking and carpentry techniques. This is an interesting aircraft. This is a Vans RV4. Vans is a company from America that builds kits. This particular aircraft was built by Jon Johanson, and his claim to fame is the fact that he flew around the world 3 times in this particular aircraft. So flew alone, so you can imagine the long distances and the long hours spent in the cockpit of the aircraft. So once the aircraft had sort of finished all the world flights and the use by John, it's now in our possession on show here. So it's an excellent example of a kit-built aircraft and one of the very successful kit-built aircrafts around the world. Here we have a Piper Comanche. This particular aircraft was used in the 1969 England to Australia air race. Now we're fortunate that the owner of it has donated it to us once it finished its flying career. So it's a typical American-built light aircraft. They did an excellent job and quite a number of these were built. So its claim to fame is that it flew in that 1969 air race, which was the 50th anniversary of the Smith flight from England to Australia in 1919. This is a scale model of the Vickers Vimy aircraft. This is the one that flew from England to Australia in 1919. The Smith brothers, Sir Ross and Sir Keith Smith, were the pilots, and they won the race and won the £10,000 prize at the time. So the aircraft itself is displayed at Adelaide Airport, and this being a model of it shows you the typical design of the era, which is sort of an early biplane construction that was used quite commonly back in that time.
Hi, I'm Chris Dowdy. This particular aeroplane is an Aero 145, manufactured in Czechoslovakia in the early 60s. This particular aeroplane, one of 3, was operated by my parents' Commodore Aviation Company out of Port Lincoln, tuna spotting and servicing of Neptune and Orthorpe Island.
Hello, I'm Mike Milne. I'm Vice President of the museum, part of a 9-member committee. So as Vice President, I'm one of the fortunate few on the committee that don't have specific duties but fill in a number of areas.
My name is David Byrne and I'm the President of the South Australian Aviation Museum, which, as you probably heard, is a totally volunteer incorporated association, totally non-profit, and we manage to run this with the funds that we collect off the public and sometimes some small grants. The museum was formed to try and record and display South Australia's rich aviation history. It was all rotting away in paddocks, old planes from World War II and other things like that. And we've slowly collected them and restored them. And as you can see behind, there's some people working away there. Many of them are ex-RAAF and ex-mechanics from the Air Force and other airlines. And their interest is just continued by coming down here. The museum is going very well. It's surviving its issues with the COVID at the moment, and the public are supporting us quite well. So overall, I think we're doing a pretty good job of keeping South Australia's history, aviation history, alive and ready for the public to see.
We welcome you to come along here. We're open 7 days a week, 10:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. The only day we're not open is on Christmas Day, but otherwise every day we are open. So please come along, come and enjoy. We would certainly welcome you.